we have something called our Collegiate effort, and it's in the pilot process. It's been that way for a little time. So Clarence here is on that team trying to help us with that effort. So thank you so much, Clarence. Yes, it's been awesome. So we thought what we would do today, I'm going to give each of the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, but the whole purpose of doing this is to talk to our youth. So we have been doing a lot of talking on what we think we should do, but we want to hear directly from our youth and also people who are talking to our youth very regularly to see where's the gap in what they're looking for versus what we're offering, and see if we can come up with ideas and takeaways so we can go back to our companies with some solutions to fill that gap a little more. So with that, I'm just going to let everybody introduce themselves, and Clarence, I'll start with you.
Hello, I am Clarence Semple. I am an inside sales manager with Newark Electronics, a part of the Avnet umbrella. So, big shout outs to Phil with the Avnet family here. Inside sales manager with Newark. I've been in the industry now for going on 9 years. Worked my way up through sales and through marketing and a couple other positions there. And since has joined into leadership and been leading my team now for about 4 years. A couple of years later, got an opportunity to be a part of this program. And so, I'm excited to chat with you all about what we've been doing, what we've been working on, and then just have an open discussion about what the future looks like as far as bringing new talent into this industry.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Suzanne Helbig. I serve as the Associate Vice Provost for the Division of Career Pathways at the University of California, Irvine. It's one of the world's longest titles. But what does that mean? That means that I head up the career services operations for the University of California. And that means that we help students with career discovery, internships, full-time employment, also helping them if they want to apply to graduate school as part of their career. And I've been in the field of college career services for over 20 years. I spent the first half of my career at UC Berkeley's Career Center. I started as a career counselor. Echoing some of what I've heard today, I had a boss who was a mentor who said, "Hey, here's this project." I'd be like, okay, let me go freak out in my office for a few hours, and then I'm going to look at Google, and then we'll figure it out. But that helped me advance my career, and I moved to UC Irvine when the leadership role became available there. So I've been there 10 years now. Love my job, and really thrilled to be here today to talk to you about the next wave of talent.
Hi everyone, my name is Sage Smith. I am a fourth-year computer science student at Arizona State University, and I actually met Clarence when I was at a career fair. Previously, I attended Kent State University, and he put me into contact with Jackie, and that's how I got connected with Women in Electronics.
Yes, and she has been probably just talking to her in the time that I have. She's one to keep your eye on, let me tell you. She's going to be a mover and a shaker, I can promise you that. So we have UCI here because we are establishing a really great relationship, and we're talking about relationships. We're trying to develop a program that is not just going to career fairs when you need something. It's a relationship with the college. It's a relationship with the students. It's people being on campus to talk to groups, to address needs, to see what they're saying, to have a regular presence. So we've been trying to develop this over the last few years, and I think it's going pretty good. We're taking things very slowly, but we're in this pilot program to see what's working, what's not working, and how we should go forward. So there was an opportunity at Kent State, and our collegiate team was there. That's how they met Sage, and again, that's how we got connected. The whole point of this panel is to listen and hear what they have to say and make decisions within our organizations how we want to look at recruiting. But anyway, I'm going to start with you, Clarence, just to we've mentioned the collegiate effort. If you can just say what it is you and Paul and team are doing specifically, and why did you want to get involved?
Sure. So I got this opportunity. It's been maybe 2 years now?
Yeah.
A year and a half, 2 years or so where we started with this. It was myself and Paul Starr, who is director of sales over at Newark. We're a part of kind of the Ohio team. We had some representation in Texas and then obviously in California as well. With the thought of going to these career fairs, going out to the colleges, actually really started virtually because it was during COVID time, right? And just trying to see what the talent pool what the talent pool was like out there, but also get a good understanding of what they're looking for from in an employer as well, and take notes on that to bring it back to this organization. So it's funny, especially now that like I've gone to a few of the in-person career fairs. Folks have asked me that very question, like, why am I involved in this as a man, right? And it's myself, and then there's a white guy that is a bit older than me, that kind of like group that we know has been representing electronics for a while. What do they have to say about women in electronics? And so it's made me think over time, why I'm here and why it's so important to me. And I just know for myself, allyship has been the reason why I've gotten to where I'm at in my career. I really don't have much of my career that I can't attribute to some sort of relationship that I've developed, some sort of mentorship. And that's what, Women in Electronics and We United as a whole embodies, is making sure that folks are really invested in their career paths, that they have a representation, that they can look at someone who might look like them, but also just might think like them as well too, right? And develop that. And so, Paul and I, we've had to kind of develop our pitch as we're at these career fairs very quickly to talk about that sort of thing. But I just know what it's like to not have that representation versus what it's like when I do have it. And when I have the representation, my career has advanced.
And shout out to Clarence for representing women in electronics at our events. Yes. So I'm going to get on to the other panelists in a minute, but so Clarence, I just wanted to ask you too, so from your perspective, what so far overall are you hearing from our youth? What are they saying to you? And we've done several now. So what are you hearing?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is they understand that there is a certain perception and that there's a certain bias that's already attributed to them. Most of the folks, especially the people that we're talking to coming into the workforce now, are part of that kind of Gen Z group of individuals. And there's a certain perception of like what that individual is like. And so, they want to know that the employers are confident in what they're bringing to the table, that they're going to be heard once they're brought into an organization. They want to know that they also have that real support and a way up, a pathway up as far as their development. But then we have these conversations in these career fairs about making sure that that's a two-way street, right? So that those folks are owning their development, that they know that if they invest in themselves, then folks will invest back in them. But it's also intentional for us as leaders to make sure that we're recognizing those individuals and empowering them to take those steps in their career.
Okay, and then Suzanne, what are you hearing in general?
Well, I echo a lot of what Clarence just said, but generally speaking, when we ask students what they're looking for in an employment opportunity, they are looking for a sense of stability. And they don't think, to them, that doesn't mean staying with the same company for years and years. To them, that means what are the opportunities for advancement, like you said, and how is the company going to assist with my upskilling, my reskilling, my reinvention. So that's stability is taking on a different definition for this generation of students. The students also they just want to do good work. So they're looking for the content of the work that will engage them, and then kind of speaking to the topic here today is who are they going to do the work with? So they want to be engaged with their colleagues. They they have grown up with DEIB. They are expecting it, and if it's not present, you are behind. So that's something they're expecting. And then I say the last thing that they say, and they say sometimes this is even more important to them than things like salary. They just want to know that the work they're doing ties to something bigger, that it's mission driven. And I just want to harken back to a question that was raised earlier about should companies be involved in social responsibility? And I think this generation of talent would say, we expect you to be, and we want to be a part of that. So it's not just good for society, it's good for your recruiting strategies and your retention strategies.
That's such a good point. So thinking about all of that, because we hear all these, we're talking about biases and stereotypes and all this today. There are a lot of biases towards our youth, which makes me really sad, because when I was growing up and when I was in college, there was so much hope. People would look at me like I had my whole life ahead and that you had so much potential. But I feel like our youth hear a lot of negative things about them now. You hear, oh, those millennials and things like that. And I'm going to turn it to Sage, because I look at her and I'm like, oh my goodness, you are the ticket. And I just feel like we have so much of you around. So I would love for people to kind of listen to Sage, listen to this panel, and maybe open our minds to what potential is in store for us with our next generation. So Sage, when you went to Kent State, and Clarence found you, what are you looking for when you're going to a recruitment event?
So definitely, when I met Paul and Clarence, they put me in contact directly with you right away. And I think that spoke volumes about the company, because in a day and age where every internship is found off LinkedIn, everything's online, like that speaks volumes to like how the company is the whole. So I think that definitely personal connection is what I'm looking for. And I know that there's a huge stigma around Gen Z and how none of us want to work because we're lazy, and that's the idea of what our generation is like. And I definitely can understand that in a day and age where everything is online, everything is like, it's so hard to find a company where personal connection is valued.
Ooh. So we say we value it, but do we show we value it? So give your background a little bit so everybody else introduce.
Yes, so I actually grew up overseas. I grew up in Shanghai, China, and then Bahrain and Oman in the Middle East. And I think that like plays a huge part in who I am as a person today. And I think that's a huge part of my character development as to why like I want personal connection, because I grew up with it. So after being in the Middle East, I moved back to the States, Sacramento, California, went to high school there, and then went to junior college for 2 years and transferred to Kent State. I went there for fashion, and then eventually changed my major to computer science because I just wanted a little more of a challenge. And then I met Clarence and Paul, and that's where I am today.
So what is it specifically? So if you could pick the perfect company to work for. So obviously, just by me talking to you the times I have, I know you're going to be a hard worker. I know you come from a good place. I know you have good values. What is it you are looking for in an organization? What's your ideal?
So my ideal would definitely be a company that cares about you. You don't feel like you just hopped on the corporate ladder. I'd explain it like that. You and I have been in contact, and just longevity with the higher ups, I'd say, like that speaks volumes to me as to like who a company sees you as. Like we talk about a mission, and I think that is so valuable. Like when a higher up wants to continue speaking to you and continue like getting ideas from you. You've asked me ideas in our meetings, and I'm on this panel today. Like your opinion is valued, and I think that's my ideal in a company.
We've talked about value a lot this whole entire summit, so it all stems right here when we're bringing our youth in. How are we really making them feel valued? So to me, when I'm looking at all of the conversations we've had from yesterday, today, it seems to be the overall theme of people feeling valued. That seems to be pretty big. So it's the cultures maybe showing the value, not just to our youth, but to the whole, to the organizations.
Jackie, if I could piggyback off of that, one of the things that I hear within my office is the importance of presence of every level of the organization, right? And so access to different people within the organization. So when you talk about having that personal connection with a higher up, it's, when an executive comes in from out of town, are they sitting in a room all day, or are they walking around, getting to know people, meeting the new folks, and having that personal connection? That's something that the youth are craving, and we want to make sure that we're letting them know that that's the type of cultures that we have at our organizations, but also just anyone in the organization needs that connection as well. So, you're not going to get as much done sitting in a room having that executive meeting. You're going to get much more done being on the floor, talking with folks, making those personal connections.
Suzanne, so I want to ask you, so you have that vantage point where you work with other industries, not just ours. So you see the best practices. You see who is bringing in people effectively, keeping them effectively, and who's really doing it right. So what are some best practices, or who's doing it right? What could we learn from your perspective?
Yeah, we at UCI, we probably bring over 500 individual companies to campus per year. So we do see a broad kind of bird's eye view. When people ask me who's doing recruiting right, they might be surprised by the answers, but it is the insurance companies, the accounting companies, the consulting companies, and I'd say at the top of the pile is Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Okay, so what are they doing specifically?
What are they doing?
Yes, what are they doing?
It goes back to a lot of what's coming up here is building connections. So these companies don't think that they can swoop in for one career fair, one and done, and be gone. You can't do that. You need to have a sustained presence on campus. You need to make at least a 3-year commitment. You need to show up in different junctures of a student's career. So is it offering them an internship? Is it offering them a site visit? Is it offering to be a capstone project sponsor? But you really, especially if you're not a household name, you really need to be on campus, be visible, start building trust, or you're not going to get the yield that you're looking for. And then, as you're doing your recruiting, there's usually that time between making the offer and bringing the student on board. That's a very critical time to stay in touch with that student. We talked about the social activities. Have a social activity then. Don't wait until they come on board. And then when they come on board, if you've been, telling them about your diversity initiatives, you can't do a bait and switch. Okay, so you can't get them in the door and then not have an inclusive environment. Okay, so you need to continue with ERGs, promoting professional development opportunities, mentorship. But bottom line is, if you want to succeed at recruiting on campus, you really have to see it as a relationship with that campus, and you really have to show up.
So real quick, let's just circle back on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we've been having this conversation, and we said it earlier, I think a lot of organizations are getting the diversity fatigue because we keep talking about it so much. But the reason we keep talking about it is because our youth coming in, they really want to see it, right? And so can you just elaborate more on that, like what you're hearing, and what are the comments about this?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, most of our students have grown up in the culture that values or talks about DEIB. It's part of who they are at this point. So they are looking for organizations that reach out and work with their student clubs that have different community affiliations. They are looking for those sponsorship opportunities while they're students. And then when they get there, or I can't talk, before they get there and when they're there as well, to your point, Sage, they're looking for who are the leaders? Yeah, do I see myself there? They're definitely looking for that representation. But yeah, again, continuing with the ERG type activities, and mentorship opportunities, I think, are very important. And students will ask. It's standard practice at career centers across the country to have a whole list of questions to ask if you want to really suss out what's really going on with DEIB at a company, because students have asked us for those questions, and they can sniff out authenticity. They'll know if you're walking your talk or not.
Wow. So Sage, okay, so for you, from your perspective, you're actively looking, right? So what are your barriers? What do you see as your barriers? Do you have a lot of options, you feel? How does that look for you?
I think when it comes to barriers, I spoke about how in this day and age, internships are all through LinkedIn. They're through Indeed. Like, everything is online, and I feel that that is a barrier because companies will look at your resume and just filter it out based on certain like buzzwords. So I feel that that's a barrier because, like we spoke about previously, personal connection is not found in that.
So that's a barrier. So are you feeling like it's hard to find a job? Like, are you?
Yes. So if I spoke to any of my classmates and they're not, top of their class, they could be a super hard worker. They could be everything you're looking for. But because of those buzzwords that filter those kids out, you're not going to get to meet them because you don't value developing a personal connection with them, if that makes sense.
Ooh. So we talked about the
I was
AI
going to
tools.
say that's why you need to be on campus.
Yeah.
And there's so many different ways for employers to show up on campus. And one of the more popular ways is also just the individual information session, bringing some of your senior leaders and the folks, the peer level that the entry level college folks will be working with to let them get to know you as people. That's what they want. And have pizza.
That's a really good point. So I'm just so curious, though, because we always hear about this lack of talent. We always hear about we just can't get people in, or we can't get a certain demographic, but yet then we have people that just can't even get the resume seen. So we probably have to relook at how we're even recruiting from point one. And making it all about those relationships. And if you establish them, even just, I don't know, how long have we been talking now, Sage?
4 months.
4 months. Have definitely got to know who she is. Definitely would know her strengths, if she is hireable, the whole thing. So establishing those relationships is just making a good hiring decision. Also, but Clarence, I wanted to circle back with you because, once we bring our youth in, you're now leading other leaders, right, at your organization. So you said you're 9 years in, right? How does that look for you now that you're leading people that may be coming up? What does it look like? Are they feeling like they can advance once they're already in the organization? Or what kind of development is needing? How is that going? Just wanted your input.
Yeah, sure. So I'd say that the folks having access to all of the programs that are available to them and understanding what that is really important. I think as leaders, oftentimes we get so caught up in the metrics, or we get so caught up in like what the day-to-day activities are. So I definitely make it a point, and most of my other management colleagues make it a point to make sure that folks really do know all that's out there as far as contributing to your own development, right? And so that way that individual knows what's available to them and they can own it, but at the same time you can kind of keep an eye on what's important to them. So there's tons of them that are out there. One of the reasons why I'm a part of this as well too is I feel like this industry is so unique in terms of how connected we are, right? There's so many people who, used to work for one company and now they're at another company and that sort of thing. And so giving folks the understanding that their development that they have going through those programs doesn't necessarily start and end at that one company, that can be continued in the relationships that you build as you go throughout your career. And then in addition to that, I make it a very big point of, I call it reaching up and reaching down. So we've talked a lot about mentoring folks, but that like mentor-mentee relationship throughout your entire career, I think is really, really important. So I'm always looking for folks to mentor, and I'm always looking for folks to mentor me as well. And then that's how you kind of reach up and reach down and really build your network.
Are you finding that the younger rising talent are staying in general?
If they're invested in, yeah. If they are. And I think that it's not necessarily happening across the board. There definitely needs to be more of that. But that's where it starts with folks coming to your organization, they're working a job, but then there's so many options for them to, they're kind of like the extracurriculars, for you to be involved in. When folks start getting involved in those things, in those programs, and they're starting to build other connections outside of, just checking the box every single day, that's where you're seeing the retention happening.
So, Roya, you had mentioned what are the activities that we can do outside of maybe the traditional activities we've typically done. It's probably very critical to be thinking of these things when it comes to our youth, to get people engaged and involved. What's going to excite them? Like, Sage, what would excite you going and working for a company? What would be something that would seem like it's community building or culture building to you? Types of things.
I'd take, for example, our connection that we developed through Paul and Clarence. Like, immediately after speaking to Paul and Clarence, they gave me your email and your contact. And I think that spoke volumes as to who this community is, what this industry is like.
So it wasn't an activity, it was a connection. It was just a connection to feeling valued. That goes farther than any activity we could have. So that was a really good point. So then, Suzanne, so Clarence mentioned mentorship. We do have our We Mentorship program that we keep talking about. What are your thoughts on that, or what comments do you have about mentorship?
Well, I think that pretty much we can all agree that mentorship is really valuable done right. I think that mentorship can look very different at different points in your career. I think you can have at the university, we call them mentorship moments, where there's networking events. And so it's more of a low investment, but potentially high impact moment. So I think sometimes people hear mentorship and they think, oh, it's this, I have to meet with this person an hour every week. And it can really go from a micro mentorship moment all the way up until something like that. But I know that we had talked about, and it came up with another speaker as well, that the mentee has to really be invested in the mentorship relationship, and they need to bring something to the relationship. So, but I'm sure there's all kinds of research out there about the value of mentorships. Somebody had also mentioned having a mentor outside of your organization. I think that's really really helpful, and get that other's perspective, and somebody who's not invested in all of the different politics or personalities in your organization.
To add to that really quickly, any of the failed mentor-mentee relationships I've ever seen typically comes from one person is not really invested into it as much as they should. So you just brought up an interesting point about the mentee themselves has to be interested in that actually being a benefit to both sides of it. And so I think that encouraging folks as they're coming through to understand their own skill sets and what they can bring to the table for their mentor, I think is a good way to kind of make sure that you're closing that loop. I've seen it enough times where folks say, well, I showed up and I did all the sessions and I didn't feel like I got anything out of it. So making sure that loop's closed, because it does have to be that give and take.
And then what are you feeling, I would address Suzanne and Sage with this, about here we are, women in electronics, we're in a tech-related industry. How are you feeling that the young women feel in college at that stage about being in a STEM-related field? Do they feel confident? What does that look like?
I'd say, generally speaking, I do think there's a pretty high level of confidence among women in STEM at the university, and I think that might have been reflected in some of the statistics we saw earlier, where it said the entry-level tech workforce was about 50-50. It was more like over time that gap started building. But we do hear of, expressions about imposter syndrome, feeling like you're going to be found out, you're actually a fraud. We do hear that from our students. We try to flip that around into career confidence. And we also hear, unfortunately, fairly frequently about instances within the classroom where a female student couldn't get her voice heard, or an older professor said something that was diminishing or dismissive, seemingly based on the fact that the person is a woman.
How do you feel?
So I definitely feel a sense of confidence with being in STEM, and I can speak to my classmates. I only had a few that were women because I went to Kent State, and the computer science program there is not huge. All my professors were men, so to speak to that, that does happen, unfortunately. But the sense of accomplishment you get being in STEM as a woman is great. You feel like you're doing something, and even if sometimes those professors maybe make you feel a little not so great about it, you still feel like a sense of confidence. And I was in fashion, and I felt like I wasn't doing anything meaningful. I'm not saying you can't do anything in that industry that is meaningful, but for me, it was STEM. I wanted to do something within STEM, and computer science was the route I chose to take.
I'm so proud of you. We're glad you're here trying to get a job in our industry. So are there any questions, though, for the panelists? Does anybody have any thoughts? Or yes?
So could you speak to that? Because, we went into the office 2 days a week. We're in 3 days a week. And it was like, oh, my God, you're going to lose everybody under 30. We haven't actually seen that, but there's so much noise to, maybe what Michael was talking about earlier, like when you hear it enough, you kind of just assume it's true without checking the facts. So what are the facts from what you're seeing from students?
Well, and if you're looking for facts on that, a really good resource is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. So if you want, a bigger in than the 5 people you might be talking to, that's a good place to go for information. And what they found when they look at the broad picture of college students and what they want, they do say that they want that office experience for a little while, but because they haven't had it. And I think that our college students are very intelligent in knowing that that's the way they're going to build their I call them forever skills. Some people call them soft skills, but those durable skills, they really need to get in there and have those experiences. And then beyond that, I think our students are looking down the road for that optionality. Is there the possibility of hybrid work? Is there the possibility of on-site? We've really found that with internships, that they really want those internships in person.
How do you feel about that?
I definitely say that if I'm speaking to my classmates, a lot of them do want online jobs. That is true, but they still want to feel valued by the company. So my friends will apply to internships that are hybrid or online and won't get a response from a company for however long. They still want a personal connection, even if it is online. In my generation, we all grew up with technology, so it's like and computer and online and hybrid, and then the pandemic obviously shifted things. So it's just, we still want to work, but in the way the world works, if that makes sense.
We still want to work, but in the way the world works. Ooh. Amy.
So you talked a lot about the importance of an organization being present on campus, and I understand all of the reasons for that. I think it's also a little bit easier for larger organizations with dedicated resources to do that. How do you recommend that smaller organizations best engage?
Great question. So we do tend to see some different types of engagement based on the size of the organization and also the proximity to the campus. I mean, that makes sense, right? So it's typically the larger organizations that might be hiring more of a cohort who will invest in something like a career fair. Career fairs are the main ways that career centers generate revenue, so there is a fee associated with that. There's travel, there's time. But there's so many other ways beyond career fairs. So like I mentioned, there are, and I should also say there are in-person career fairs and there are virtual career fairs. So virtual might be a way to go. The information sessions I mentioned, those can also be in person and virtual. And then throughout the year, any career center is going to have like how to write a resume or how to interview. We're always looking for employers to come in and deliver that content. I can say it, but you all have so much more credibility than I or my staff do. And then again, there's research projects, there's classroom visits. Professors want folks to come in and give a little talk to their students. So I would say if you're looking for ways to come on campus and have a real strategic approach, probably the best thing you want to do is contact that campus's career center and ask for a consultation. And what are your goals and what are the options that they can find for you? And I would be remiss also if working with student organizations is really, really important for targeting specific populations.
I agree with that, with talking to the groups, picking groups that align. For us, Women Electronics, we're aligning with IEEE and, some different groups on campus supporting young women. And so they like for us to come and speak, and they like to hear from us and hear real life stories of what's going on in the industry, what they really need to be doing. So those relationships and those groups are so critical.
Great question. Yeah, when the leadership has graduated from certain colleges and that's where they want to hire from, how do you broaden that? I think today's career center is probably a lot different than it was when many of you might have been on campus. Maybe you even used your career center, I don't know. But now there's these networked platforms, technology platforms that put jobs in front of students at different schools. So they're not just for if you want to post a job, you can select several schools at once to post it to. The movement is called democratizing access to jobs, and so many employers have really embraced that. We're also seeing, in terms of democratization of access, employers are being more open-minded about majors, sometimes not even caring about the major, but more so looking at competencies and skills, and having those students go through like an Amazon Web Services certificate program or a boot camp are other ways that employers are finding students. So, and then any career center of any size does have a dedicated employer relations staff who is doing outreach to try to bring in a diversity of companies. If you're having, you want to influence your leadership to come or to go to a variety of different schools, I'll put in another plug for NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers. That will really show them kind of the value of broadening their reach.
Can I ask one more question, please? So I know time has changed, right? I mean, we no longer use charcoal to write, as my parents would always say that. But what is the expectation of young people? I know that, so let me put it this way. I was happy to get a job, and times have changed, right? I was happy to have a beeper. I was like, oh, okay. But a few years ago, I was interviewing someone, and they asked me if they could telecommute. It was a single person, a male, and I asked why. Why do you want to telecommute? Because they lived 26 miles or 30 miles north of the company. And I said, well, why don't you just move close to the company? You're paying rent up there, you can pay rent down here. So what I want to know is the expectation, or maybe I'm wrong, the expectation of young people, what is it? They want shares, they want this, they want that. We all have to pay our dues. I paid my dues with a beeper, right? I was called at 7 in the morning. So do we see that in young people that, you know what, I gotta put in my time, you know, and
What
pay
are
my
you
dues.
seeing? Okay, first of all, I'll start with Sage. Directly asking you, and I know what you're saying because, we all paid our dues. I was counting parts and, you know what I mean? Definitely, that's how I started for the first couple of years, counting parts in a factory. So, but was happy to do it with my beeper too. I know. So how do you feel? It's like, seriously. But how do you feel about that, Sage, about paying your dues? I mean, it gets ugly, it gets dirty, and it's not so fun and great every single day. But how does that feel to you?
I believe that it's expected. I think that should be the expectation. I know a lot of my generation doesn't. I know a lot of my friends who haven't had like a customer service job per se, it shows. And like it does. Like if you haven't waited tables, or I think that's a huge, like in youth, especially, like I was 16, I had to get a job. I think if you want those kids that worked like that and paid their dues, you got to look in their resume, like, have you worked in a customer service job? That's how I would go about it personally, because there's such a difference in my friends who bust tables when they were 16 to my friends who worked for their parents in a corporate office when they were 16, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it goes back to what you were saying, Phil. You were working in the gas station, right? And you're doing all that, crashing the bus.
But it's twofold, right? So it's if you work hard and you pay your dues, here are the opportunities that are available to you in so many ways. And so I think that has to be top of mind of any hiring manager, any person in leadership, that they're encouraging folks that you work hard, it will pay off for you.
Yeah, and so maybe we can just look at it like this. We're kind of at an inflection point. So we do tend to work, I don't know, people work pretty darn hard in this industry, I would think. I think most people work a lot of hours, and it's kind of expected. But is it that we need to acknowledge that that's happening and let people have a little more life balance, if there's such a thing? But most people, I would think, work between 50 and 70 hours. A lot of people are working those hours. Is that sustainable, and is that what the norm should be? Should the norm be 50 hours, in general? So if you look at people and you look at leaders and you look at people rising up, they're putting in the time. There's no question about that. So our younger generation is looking at this and looking at us and saying, do I want to do that? What do you think about that, Suzanne?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, this generation is wanting to live first. They don't want to put it off until retirement. They want to enjoy life now. They also have great pressure. They have higher debt than previous generations. They're dealing with a lot. They need that balance for their wellness, their mental health, and the healthier they are, the better productivity you're going to get. What was I going to say about this? When we ask students what it is they're looking for beyond salary, it's really the basics. I mean, they really want health insurance. I mean, that's like the number one thing they want, believe it or not. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And we at the Career Center, we also try to educate students about realities. Some have very, very inflated. They think the salary they're going to get out of college is way higher than they're going to get. Or so we do our best to educate them, and that's part of bringing you all to campus, having you on panels, talking about your industry, talking about how to break into it, talking about how you advance, giving them that reality before they get to you.
I was telling somebody earlier that we had at UCI and just the business school, they called and said, hey, do you want to come and give like a little, informational chat? It was like 500 kids show up. You can't even talk to everybody. But on the virtual, not as effective because, I don't know, it's just not as relational. But I'm telling you, I could not get around. I could not get around to all the students. My voice, I literally had laryngitis after. I stayed as light as I could and still could not get to everybody. And they were all trying to get to me to say, what is this industry like? Tell me what. They had so many questions. So I think Sage really made a good point, and we talked about earlier keeping it simple, about going back and making things simple. Maybe a simple solution is having the people in those positions, in the positions of leadership, go to college as a best practice on a cadence, a couple times a year, talking directly to the students. And you see their eyes light up. Talk about mentorship. They're craving that, it seems to me.
I was just saying, not just a recruiter, right? Like actual people that are like
the actual leaders. They want to hear.
Yeah, like I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. let's rewind that back. I mean, folks that they're going to be potentially working with if they come into the industry. That's what I mean.
I have a follow-up question on that. Sorry, I'm in the middle here. Didn't even raise my hand. I just stole the mic. Sage, do you feel like, and Clarence too, because you've been on campus, and Suzanne, is there a level of leadership where we start having more of an impact? Because I also came into this industry straight out of college because of a personal connection with an executive leader in one of the distributors. And I think titles get really exciting. You're like, oh my gosh, I met with the senior vice president. Blah, blah, blah. But I think, I'm never going to graduate college and go work directly for him or her. And I'm wondering if there's a sweet spot of leadership that makes sense to have a presence on campus, and kind of your perspective on connecting with directors, senior managers versus vice presidents, senior vice presidents, C-levels.
So I don't think so, because in my experience, being on the campuses, the position that I'm in as an inside sales manager, and the position that Paul Starr is in, who is director of sales, it didn't really matter. It was just about who the student connected with more, and that. So I don't think that really matters as much. The title can be exciting, but at the end of the day, like we talked about with most of this, it's all about personal connection. So if you can come in and talk about your experience, and it means something to that graduating senior, then they're going to want to work for your organization.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, basically, it wasn't because of the title per se. It was because when I emailed Paul and Clarence and Jack, they followed up, if that makes sense. It wasn't about the title. It was about the care to respond to my email.
It seems to be a very consistent theme that we're not getting back to people. Yeah, so we like people to follow up with us, but are we offering what we're expecting? I've heard this so much from so many people. So it would be nice if people put in an application, at least if they could hear back. Right? It just as a common best practice courtesy, because we're a very high value industry and we probably should be offering that.
Yeah, even if it's a rejection, you still want to hear back. It just, so many of my classmates applied to so many internships and just heard nothing back. And it discourages you as a student, because internship, you feel like you're applying to nothing. As long as you get a rejection email back, at least you're like, oh, okay, they looked at it.
Wow. Okay, so we are about to wrap it up. Any more questions before we finish?
I have one more question over here, or comment over here, Jackie. Yeah. So our company has a pretty big recruiting collegiate program, And the way we do it today is we try to understand what are the needs in the company first. And then we go to different locations based on those needs, and we hire for specific positions. I heard you say something very important earlier about making sure they understand all the opportunities within the company. So what's happening today, we have 17 of them. We've recruited them for specific locations, specific roles. But then they get into the organization and they understand what these other opportunities are. And so now we're kind of in this conundrum of they don't want to go to their assignments or they want to do something else. So I'm thinking that maybe we need to have a different approach of we have a need, bring them in. It's a 6-month program, by the way, where we immerse them in the business. So maybe we need to bring them in for specific needs and let them look at what the opportunities are and then decide once they get there what's the best fit. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a good thought. I think it's just really going to depend on your organization. I do know that rotational programs are very attractive to students because we expect our 18-year-olds to know what they want to do with their lives. So giving them that rotational experience so they can experience things firsthand is very much appreciated by them. And so it might be that maybe you don't need to retool everything, but just set up the expectations up front. Like, this is what this program's going to look like. You're going to spend a week here, a week here, a week here. And so they know, and they go into it knowing that, and it kind of might mitigate the, I don't want to do that. Well, we told you were going to do that, so you're going to do that, and you're going to like it.
Yeah, no, we don't want that.
I know Eaton and Nestle both have great rotational programs. So if you have friends at either of those organizations, tap in with them because they can tell you a little bit about that.
That's really
Thank
good
you.
input. That's really good input.
My daughter's 21, but every summer she's had a different internship, and she's had a totally different experience. And I'm trying to think of what it is that made it a good or bad experience. Well, none of it was bad, and I know it's difficult because everyone's busy, but what really made her connect was where she felt involved and respected. It had nothing to do with the fringe benefits, the Tommy Bahamas beach chair or the lunch or whatever, right? I'm not saying those things are not important, right? I do have a ping pong table and the kids never use it. But so, looking at the kids that all graduated UNH the same year that she did, they were all great. But it was the employers that were not so great because my daughter's kind of stayed on to do her MBA, right? And so she's getting actively recruited by all these companies. And her friends work with me. The type, the boiler rooms. It's a job in sales. It's calling. How many spam calls do you get, right? This is so-and-so from such and such. That's the job. So the employer has a responsibility to give people a fair opportunity. So that's my view.
Good point. So lots of good comments. We see people do things all the time that don't seem fair and right. So let's now look at it as our incoming youth. There's a lot we can do moving forward. We can start establishing relationships at the colleges that are genuine, sending the right people there from our organizations. We can show more care when they come in and respond, just basic things. Basic common courtesy will go a long way as responding.
Can I say one last thing? So I just want to say this. I mentioned it to you when we were all planning this, and I want to say it again. It is such an honor to be a part of this and be a part of this panel. I come from a mother, single mom, came from Jamaica when she was 16 years old, and she literally worked for everything she has. Now she owns 2 businesses, and I want to circle it back to what I said at the very beginning around allyship, and I really don't have much to call my own as far as my success. And my mother definitely did not have that, right? So I know the power of a woman that's working hard to try to achieve what she's looking. My mother's birthday is actually today, right now, and I could cry just thinking about it. And so, but also in addition to that, these type of programs and things like this weren't available from my mother when she was starting in her industry. So I'm also looking forward to what this allyship in this room is going to lead towards, because if I know it's helped my career in the way that it has to this point, then I know it can help everyone else in this room. So thanks for allowing me to be here.
Clarence, we're so honored. We're so blessed here at Women in Electronics because we have the most amazing people coming into our organization helping us. And any final thoughts from you, Susan, before we end? I just changed your name for you.
It's okay.
I tend to do that to people.
I answer to anything that starts with an S. So, I think, I just want to echo the strengths of this organization. If any of you have had any children in high school in the past 10 years or so, you see how hard they work. I mean, it's amazing. I could never get into UCI if how I was in high school. So, I mean, just knowing that, and just, terms like grit can be applied to this generation. So I work with these students day in and day out. They are amazing. They are the best multitaskers you will ever see. They have so much strength and determination. They are going to enrich your organizations. So that's what I would like to end with.
Just to reiterate that, I think there's entitlement definitely throughout every generation, and it's just finding the kids that want to, like, I'm here because I worked, because I sent the follow-up emails. You're in the position you're in because you did what you had to do to get there. It's just about defying that stigma of this generation doesn't want to work. There are people in there that want to work. There are people in every generation that want to work. You just have to find them.
We just have to find them, and we'll just conclude by saying, I just hope moving beyond, as we all go out, we all have our certain biases and things like this. I just hope that we all give our youth some patience and grace, and just really bring them up and elevate them, and stop ourselves from talking negative about our youth, because we hear it so much. And I have young children as well that are rising up and working so hard. And I know they're good people, and I know they're talented, and I don't like to hear them being talked about that way too, because we all have children, right? And we're trying to raise them a certain way. And I just think that they are our hope. They have to know and feel they are our hope. And I have so much faith in you. Yes, you're the ticket. So anyway, with that, I think we will conclude this session, and thank you, panelists.